Look, modernity has sold you a massive, comfortable lie. We've been taught, basically from day one, that predictability, perfectly scheduled safety, and a life completely devoid of friction are the ultimate goals of a successful existence. But the research we're exploring in today's explainer suggests the exact opposite. The very comforts you've been working so hard to secure, they are actually destroying you from the inside out. Today, we are tearing down that illusion of safety and uncovering the architecture of antifragility.
The source material hits us with a pretty jarring truth right out of the gate. You are engineering your own biological decline. Think about it. Sitting in climate-controlled rooms, eating perfectly scheduled meals, and scrolling endlessly through a frictionless digital existence, you might think that's a reward for your nervous system, but it's not. Your biology actually perceives this extreme comfort as a direct signal to atrophy. Just like a guy who spends a month in bed loses all his muscle mass, your neurobiology actively degrades when it's deprived of stressors.
Risk analyst Nassim Nicholas Taleb has a great term for this. He calls it touristification, which is just the systematic removal of uncertainty and randomness from your environment. We are literally treating ourselves like mechanical washing machines that wear out with use and require a highly predictable, perfectly safe environment. But here's the thing. Humans aren't machines. We are living organisms. We heal, adapt, and grow specifically through struggle. By stripping away randomness just for the sake of convenience, we're making ourselves incredibly fragile.
Let's dive into the biological cost of all this, the slow drip of modern anxiety.
Evolution built us to handle acute stress. Think sprinting from a predator, lifting heavy objects, fighting for your life. In nature, this intense spike is always followed by a biological release and ample time to recover. But today, we avoid those acute natural stressors and replace them with the slow, dripping poison of chronic stress. The daily commute, an overflowing email inbox, taxes, the neurotic fear of a boss. Taleb compares this to a Chinese water torture of continuous, mild cortisol release that absolutely never gives your body time to recover.
What this means is that your current lifestyle is essentially a preventable chronic stress injury. The absence of intense acute stress, combined with the constant presence of that low-level friction, absolutely destroys your system. You've essentially turned yourself into a fragile porcelain cup, just waiting to be shattered by the first unpredictable shock. And why? Simply because you've been taught to avoid the very volatility your DNA literally requires to survive.
So, how do we fix it? Protocol number 1, via negativa and biological subtraction.
Evolution demands two biological mechanisms for us to thrive. The first is hormesis. This is where low doses of a poison or a stressor actually stimulate exponential growth and adaptation. The second is autophagy, which is basically your body's cellular vacuum cleaner. When you practice intermittent fasting or occasional starvation, you remove those constant hormonal rushes that come with predictable feeding. Deprived of external food, your cells literally start clearing out biological waste and recombining proteins to build much stronger structures.
Listen, you don't need another productivity app or some crazy, complex morning routine. The ultimate biohack is extreme biological subtraction. You have to ruthlessly subtract modern irritants that are confusing your biology. Eliminate the daily news. It's just a stream of neurotic noise that forces your brain to overreact and spikes your stress hormones. Cut out the toxic media, ditch the hypersocial dependencies, and stop eating perfectly scheduled meals. You need to strip your system down to its ruthless, functional core.
Moving on to protocol number 2, the evolutionary mandate of friction.
You must systematically inject acute physical trauma into your existence. Imagine deadlifting your absolute maximum weight, say 100 pounds, just once. That single explosive act of absolute resistance triggers a massive neuroendocrine response. Your biology anticipates a harsher environment in the future and overcompensates by adding dense muscle mass. Now contrast that with lifting a 1-pound weight 100 times on some mind-numbing repetitive routine designed for comfort. That does absolutely nothing but waste your life. You push your structure to the absolute limit, and then you rest aggressively to rebuild those broken fibers.
Now let's look at the psychological side. The Stoic contrast. Domesticating uncertainty. Helen Keller once noted that the fearful are caught as often as the bold. Think about the modern worker today, terrified of losing their pathetic accumulated comforts, living under a constant sword of Damocles, paranoid about the next market crash or social failure. But if the fearful are caught by disaster just as often as the bold, there is absolutely no advantage to being timid. Fear only feeds on itself the longer you stay hidden in your comfort zone.
To overcome this paranoia, Taleb proposes something called the Barbell Strategy. You completely avoid that murky, moderate risk middle.
On one extreme, you are hyper-paranoid about protecting your baseline. You remove the absolute risk of total ruin, meaning you avoid all debt, stop smoking, cut out sugar. Then, because your baseline is utterly unbreakable, you can expose yourself to wildly aggressive, calculated risks on the extreme upside without any fear.
This brings us directly to Taleb's triad, which categorizes how things respond to chaos. We have the fragile, things that get damaged by disorder. We have the robust, things that resist disorder and just stay the same. But here's the secret. You don't just want to survive fate and remain robust, you must become anti-fragile. That means you actually capture the upside of chaos. You gain from disorder.
A perfect historical example of this is the Stoic philosopher Seneca. His famous phrase was, "I lost nothing." Now, Seneca was the wealthiest man in the Roman Empire, but he practiced profound emotional robustification. He routinely rehearsed poverty, sleeping on the hard floor, eating cheap peasant food. Why? So that if disaster struck and he lost his fortune, he would not feel the sting. He systematically removed his psychological dependence on his wealth, capturing the upside while making himself entirely unbreakable.
That leads us into protocol number 3, the execution and the apex predator.
You have to stop planning your life and start exploiting catastrophic errors. Entrepreneur Tom Bilyeu points out something brilliant. When 99% of people doubt your idea, you are either gravely wrong or you are about to make history. You have to ditch the safe emulation game. Taking terrifying risks and being willing to fail is essential because every single failure is highly concentrated feedback that makes you stronger.
If you spend your whole life trying to become someone else, judging your abilities by external, manufactured metrics, you're the fish trying to climb the tree. You have to use via negativa, subtracting all that noise and external expectation to find your unique essence. Find out what excites you, what you're actually willing to suffer for, and pour all your energy into that specific pathway.
Because at the end of the day, you are not just building resilience. Resilience just means bouncing back to your baseline. No, by taking those terrifying first steps and making bold momentum your default, you are mutating into an apex predator of chaos. You grow stronger from every single failure, functioning as a system built entirely on antifragility.
The era of your fragile comfort ends this exact second. You don't need another weekend binge-watching television in a perfectly temperature-controlled room. You need to wake up the animal inside you. The research is completely clear on this. The longer you stay hidden away in your artificial safety, the more your fear magnifies.
Which leaves us with one final stark choice. Do you want to adapt to fear, remaining a fragile product of touristification? Or do you want to adapt to growth by deliberately injecting chaos, uncertainty, and friction right back into your baseline reality? The choice is entirely yours, but only one path leads to a life actually worth living. Domesticate uncertainty and let it fuel your dominance. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.